We gather across this great state of ours today to commemorate ANZAC Day 2020. These are unprecedented times for veterans, our community, our state, our nation, and the world at large. Wherever you are this ANZAC Day, I want you to remember those who fought and died and those who have served and continue to serve our nation today. I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are now on and recognise their continuing connection to land, water and community. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. To all Australians, ANZAC Day is a tradition, paid for in blood and cherished in our freedom. It is a day in which not only do we salute the Anzacs, but in paying tribute to them, we also take the opportunity to invigorate our national spirit and pride. 105 years ago, the Anzac tradition was born on the shores of Gallipoli during the First World War. It was where the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps forged a legend of mateship, determination, courage and resourcefulness. In total, 36,000 Australian and New Zealand soldiers were killed or wounded on Gallipoli. Today is also about remembering all our service personnel who paid the ultimate sacrifice in the campaigns of the Boer War, First World War, Second World War, Korean War, Malaysian confrontation, emergency, Indonesian confrontation, the Vietnam War, Iraq, Afghanistan and peacekeeping operations. This year particularly, we commemorate 75 years since the campaign in Europe and the Pacific ended with the end of World War II, a war in which the whole nation rose again to the challenge and saw war come to our shores. My father, an infantryman, served in some of the ferocious battles. The physical and mental scars would haunt him for many years after the war had ended. Still today, our Australian Defence Forces is involved in various operations across the world. Some of these ensuring people less fortunate than us can live in peace. Others involved in providing humanitarian and aid assistance, and others who are assisting in combat operations or training every day to ensure that our citizens are kept safe abroad and at home. Even this year, we have seen our Defence Force members serve alongside our civil authorities during the bushfires that ravaged our state and nation, and saw the loss of brave men and women who were serving in the Rural Fire Service. Now with the COVID-19 pandemic, our Defence Force members have stood up to serve alongside the health workers, the doctors, nurses, paramedics and our police. There are others who the Prime Minister has called essential workers, who are holding open our supply lines and stores. The community as well is doing its bit to prevent the loss of lives. Many of you are saddened that ANZAC Day services could not be held the way they normally are. The last time services were suspended was in 1919, when they were dealing with the last great pandemic. I'm proud of how the veterans have understood what is needed to be done. They've realised that the welfare and safety of the community as a whole is important. Just because we cannot gather together on our traditional ANZAC Day services does not mean that we don't remember and commemorate those who fought and died and those who served. We are as one doing what our forefathers did on the hills of Gallipoli. We are uniting together to fight this threat. Veterans and families across Australia have lost jobs and will find next year so tough. Our nation will struggle, but I believe that we will recover. We will rise to rebuild and we will commemorate ANZAC Day as we always have in years to come. Let us remember today that more than 102,000 Australians who lost their lives while serving our nation. Let us also think of those who return from war and conflict and have battled every day to readjust to life in our society. I've seen the growing need to support our veterans. It is tragic that so many veterans have battled depression and post-traumatic stress. We need to support all veterans who are struggling to have courage to speak up. In this time of isolation, I ask that those veterans and families who can make a call to a veteran and a war widow who are struggling at this time, especially making the isolation during this pandemic. The ANZAC spirit is one that should flow through all of us. It is one of courage and mateship. It is one that shows us that we need to look after everyone and each other. It is what is helping our nation to fight this pandemic. What is important about commemoration like ANZAC Day is that the values that we see in those who served, listening to or watching stories of veterans, you will hear the tales of friendship and mateship, the stories of good times and funny times that happened during their service, the shared experience of putting on a uniform. And it is not about the glory of war. My own service was filled with some great stories of lifelong friends and mates who I served with. ANZAC Day 2020 will be remembered in a different way for all of us. We may not be physically standing next to our mates or our family this year, but we have them in our hearts and in our thoughts. We can still commemorate the supreme sacrifice made by so many. We should also call up those who we know in our families and the community who are veterans and have a chat today. Perhaps you can even do a video call. Remember, it is time to pause and reflect together as a nation. The legacy of the ANZAC is with us here today. Forever we will be indebted to those who fought and served our nation. We will remember them, lest we forget.